This is not going to be a light topic. This is not going to be a pleasant topic. In fact, many of you watching, to you, this might even be a personal topic. And I don't say any of that lightly. This is gonna suck. But it is nonetheless a thing that we need to talk about. And I didn't want to talk about this for a couple days because I wanted to do a little research on it and have some stuff pulled up. I've got that. I'm ready to do this. We'll do fan art real quick as the one little saving grace before we get into the topic itself. But we've got to talk about electroshock therapy. And not in the way that you think. So first, we have a piece that was done by Ashi. And honestly, this is a very concerned look. And this is the concerned look that I'm feeling in real life right now. Thank you very much for the fan art submission, as always. But this part is this part's gonna suck. So let's talk about the history of electroshock therapy. Now, there's two types of electroshock therapy. There's one type of electroshock therapy in which we have people under anesthesia and we are throwing a small electric current through nodes on the brain. Or not on the brain, but they're going through the brain. And there's a lot of things in which this type of electroshock therapy can help. This is not the kind we're talking about today, but I am going to bring it up for those of you who tried to get in the comment section talking about this version of electroshock therapy and not what we are here to talk about. But, just so you know, we are not talking about ECT. So, ECT is a last resort. This is something that can be used when everything else is unsuccessful. And it can be done to help things like severe depression, certain types of treatment-resistant depression, severe mania. If somebody is catatonic, it can help with. It can also help with people who have dementia. But it is meant as a therapy. This is not what we're talking about today. Today, we are talking about this device, which is completely different. This is the graduated electronic decelerator. Now, the GED is an aversive conditioning device that delivers a powerful electric skin shock as a method of punishing any behavior that is considered undesirable. The GED was created by Matthew Israel for use on students at the Judge Rottenberg Center as part of the school's behavioral modification program. The school has been condemned for torture by the United Nations for its use of the GED and other inhumane punishments. In 2020, the device was banned by the United States Food and Drug Administration. However, on July 6th, 2021, so literally a week ago, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit overturned the ruling, stating that the ban was beyond the FDA's authority. Matthew Israel created the GED, and I'm reading this off of the Wikipedia page specifically because I want this to be concise, because this is a heavy fucking topic. Matthew Israel created the GED to replace older punishments such as spankings, pinches, and muscle squeezes, but continued to use restraints, sensory deprivation, and the withholding of food in conjunction with the usage of the GED device. These older punishments were used in combination with the GED too. For example, a student could be restrained to a board and then given several GED shocks in succession. While the school advertises its behavior modification program as safe, effective, and backed by science, these claims are disputed by independent experts. Independent experts have consensually found that the GED can produce serious harms, including neuropathy, physical trauma, and even third-degree burns. This is a form of legal torture. Now, outside of the history These are the things that the GED is used for. Now, remember, when we're talking about ECT, which I assume might even be one of the reasons that some people have like some people who are not neurodivergent may have stopped talking about this. But as somebody who, aside from depression and aside from potentially undiagnosed ADHD, am fairly neurotypical. I'm even a fucking cishet white guy. I'm your average fucking Joe in the South. But I suspect one of the reasons that a lot of people might have stopped talking about this, despite the Stop the Shock hashtag being a thing on Twitter, which we will get into in a little bit, is because a lot of people might be talking about ECT, which is, of course, a last resort procedure, but is not what we were talking about. Remember, the things that ECT is meant to treat: severe depression, treatment-resistant variants of depression, severe mania, catatonia, agitation and aggression in people that have dementia. Okay? Now, when we're talking about the GED, conversely, this is a device that is used... See, okay, so these are the intended uses of the GED. The GED was supposed to be only used as a last resort to prevent aggressive or self-injurious behavior after post-behavioral support had failed. However, a 2006 report by the New York State Education Department found that there was no significant positive behavioral support program that existed, and the device was then regularly used for minor infractions. Because, of course, you didn't have another way of dealing with this. It's like saying, this is a last resort. Okay, what are the first resorts? I don't fucking know. If the only resort you have is the GED, then I guess it is a last resort. But it's also the first one. These are the things that it was used to correct: failing to be neat, wrapping one's foot around the leg of a chair, stopping work for more than 10 seconds, closing an eye for more than 5 seconds, minor acts of non-compliance. Other reported reasons for administering shocks to children included using the bathroom without permission, accidentally urinating on oneself after being refused the right to use the bathroom. You might call this a catch-22. This is also called a double bind. You have to use the restroom. You will be punished if you use the restroom without permission. You are told you are not allowed to use the restroom. You are forced to humiliate yourself by using the restroom on yourself. And then, of course, you are administered an electroshock because you urinated when you were not allowed to do it any other way. But the double bind gets worse. Let's say you scream while being shocked with the GED. Well, it turns out screaming while being shocked was another reason that the device could be used to shock you. Oh, Memory Martin, I know what the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network has to do about has to talk about where the GED is concerned. I have their article up right here. We will be getting to that. I came to this one prepared. And of course, if you attempt to remove the GED, then you will get shocked again for attempting to remove it. Additionally, the report found that the GED could be programmed to give automated skin shocks in response to targeted behaviors. For example, some students were made to sit on GED seats that would automatically administer skin shocks on the target for the target behavior of standing up, while others wore waist holsters that would administer skin shocks if the students pulled a hand out of the holster. Skin shocks were administered continuously until the target behavior stopped occurring. The center did not have necessary approval from the FDA to use the device in this way. An FDA investigation found that some parents and guardians were pressured into giving consent to put their child on the GED, that they were not provided with any accurate information about the device's risks, and that other options were not exhausted, which we already talked about, before resorting to the GED. The agency also found that the GED could cause both physical and psychological harm, including pain, burns, tissue damage, depression, fear, aggression. Furthermore, they also concluded that the GED device may have caused one resident to enter a catatonic state, and that it can in some cases worsen the behaviors that it claims to treat. Residents were also made to wear the GED devices at all hours, even during showers and sleep. Residents reported that they were sometimes awoken by shocks at night, which were administered for reasons including nighttime incontinence, tensing while asleep, having broken a rule earlier in the day. Residents would also be shocked if they failed to stay awake at daytime. One resident reported that after being shocked while asleep, staff would not explain to her why she was shocked. Fear of the shocks would then produce insomnia in the extreme variety, which would persist even when they were off of the GED, which would be considered a type of PTSD. Now, also, the GEDs also were known to sometimes malfunction, delivering repeated skin shocks until they were removed. Additionally, staff sometimes activated them by accident. Accidental activation of this is called a misapplication. Right. Now, let's talk about why somebody might do any of these things here. Failing to be neat, wrapping your foot around a chair, stopping work for more than 10 seconds. So, can I just say that if somebody's neurodivergent, let's say that they have ADHD, or let's say that they have, I don't know, autism, would the likelihood of them engaging in any of these behaviors potentially increase? Any of them? I'd say yes. In fact, I'd say that it's almost a guarantee that being neurodivergent would increase the likelihood that these unwanted behaviors might potentially have happened. You can't shock the autism out of somebody. You cannot shock neurodivergency out of somebody's system. Yes, Illuminati did a very good video on Autism Speaks as well, talking about shit like this. Yeah, apparently, Bregman was right. Being human should be on the list. Like, literally, you're just being shocked for being human. So, let's move on to what the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network has to say about this issue. A lot of this is going to be me presenting this stuff as opposed to me trying to speak on it personally, because I do not have personal experience with this. However, I can read off information as an attempt to signal boost shit like this. The Autistic Self-Advocacy Network is heartbroken and outraged by today's court decision striking down a regulation that would have banned the use of the graduated electronic decelerator, a skin shock device used on people with disabilities. These devices, which the United Nations has recognized as torture devices, involve causing severe pain in an attempt to control behavior and are only used at the Judge Rotenberg Center, an institution in Massachusetts. The disability community has fought for decades against the use of skin shocks on our people. Last year, after receiving extensive input from experts and community members, the FDA finalized regulations that banned the manufacture, distribution, and use of skin shock devices. The regulation was finalized 4 years after it had been introduced, and 6 years after an expert panel had recommended the ban. With strong bipartisan support, mind you. Over 300,000 people signed a petition urging the FDA to act. But instead of following the new regulations, the JRC immediately filed a lawsuit against the FDA, saying that they were allowed to continue torturing people with disabilities. The lawsuit was only the most recent in a long stream of aggressive lawsuits, fighting the attempts to curb their abuses on human rights. Additionally, the trial court had initially upheld the FDA's regulations. Today, however, today being on the 6th of this month, the GED, or the DC Circuit, overturned that decision because the FDA's regulation specifically bans the use of the GED for one purpose: behavior modification. The DC Circuit Court ruled that the FDA did not have the authority to ban the device completely. Or they have the authority to ban a device completely, but they do not have the authority to ban only one possible use of a device. The next step is clear. The FDA must completely ban the GED and similar devices. The Autistic Self-Advocacy Network calls the FDA to immediately pursue a new complete ban. They'll continue to advocate fiercely until this torture is finally ended. They say their community is currently grieving and outraged on behalf of many disabled people who will continue to experience daily abuse as the result of this decision. Their fight is not over, and they will not give up. The Autistic Self-Advocacy Network will continue to use every tool at their disposal and work with the state and federal policymakers to end the torture at the JRC and all other uses for aversive treatment. We will not rest until no disabled person is subjected to torture in this manner. Can I show you something heartbreaking also? Right? Here. A student who had received electroshock torture actually made this image. I want you to look at it in case you think that this is something that you shouldn't care about. Doesn't affect you. Because yeah, it doesn't affect me. But it doesn't have to affect me for me to have empathy. The child is literally saying, I'm sorry, please stop it, please, no more, all done. Which, of course, as we looked up earlier, per the policy of the use of the GED, it's perfectly okay for them to shock her again because she's complaining about being shocked. This is, in fact, a fucking nightmare. There's more. So, we happen to have, and of course there's a trigger warning here, but I gave my warnings in the beginning of the episode, so here we are. From a user named Amanda, or Golden Sapphire, we're going to go ahead and like their post. We are also going to retweet their post. We are going to see if we can get as many eyes on a post like this as possible. But it reads here, since non-autistics on my timeline stopped talking about it, here's a fresh reminder of what is currently going on in the autism community. The DC Circuit overturned the FDA's ban. Assange announces the court ruling on electric skin shock. And of course, we have the article from the Assange Network. There's also more information linked here from another user. And of course, Autism Speaks is one of the places that's being talked about as well, because of course they are, that place that literally fucking tortures people and says they're an advocacy network. Hashtag STOPTHESHOCK stopped being trending a little while ago, and until something's done, that hashtag probably needs to be flooded still. So, this is bare bones. This is with as little of my extra commentary as I can manage, because this, quite frankly, is one of those things that pisses me off to no end. When somebody is saying that electroshock therapy is fine, remind them that they are probably talking about ECT, which, like many other experimental things we have in the realm of psychology, might have been based on abuse at one point, but does have its uses in medicine. Remind them that what you're talking about is this. You are talking about the graduated electronic decelerator, not ECT, not this form of therapy. We are talking about this. And it's very important to make that distinction. So you know the guy who made ECT also made conversion therapy? Look, the source, like okay, the source of a medical breakthrough of any kind does not suddenly mean that there is not uses for that medical breakthrough, insofar as you can consider this a breakthrough. Again, that's why I just said, despite the sordid path, or the sordid past of many things where the realm of psychology is concerned, which there are a lot. Seriously, look up the history of psychology. There's all kinds of shitty stuff in there. But despite that, there are uses for ECT. And it does not take away from my point that largely a lot of people who stopped talking about this or stopped caring about this might be thinking that we're just talking about ECT. I say this because I have seen people, while talking about the Stop the Shock thing, bring up that, oh, their parent has to have it for bipolar disorder or something like that. And it helps with that. It helps relieve symptoms, and in many cases helps relieve pain. Which, again, is what we're talking about with ECT. Well, Memory Martin, if people want to consider this a cure, it's not a cure. It's considered a treatment. It's also considered a last resort treatment. If somebody's stupid enough to consider it a cure because Autism Speak told them so, then we can correct them on a case-by-case basis. I should note right here in this video, if you are watching and you advocate for Autism Speaks, then you have two options here. Either do some research into Autism Speaks. I'll probably make a video on it at some point as well. Or watch Illuminati's video on Autism Speaks. That would be another very, very enlightening thing for you to do. Or you can also just unsubscribe, because I do not want your subscription. I would rather you understand, not you, Memory Martin, like the hypothetical person here who advocates for Autism Speaks. I would rather that person understand why that network is terrible, or simply leave. That would be my one. Pika brings up a good point. Never let anybody who says they're neutral to this or in support of it say they're pro-life. Yeah, because they're not pro-life at that point. That said, that's all the information that I am going to go into where this is concerned. Hopefully, I've given an overview. I mean, I was mostly reciting an article, but hopefully I've given an overview over the fact that a torture device is still being allowed to be used on people, including children, why it's a bad thing, the distinctions that need to be made between a version of therapy and a version of torture, and hopefully with this information, y'all can try to get that hashtag Stop the Shock hashtag going. Because it seems to have died down at this point. With that said, thank you all for viewing this video. Support me if you want to. Y'all know how. Insert end of video tagline here.